This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Welcome back, everybody. I want you to take a second, think about this. The number of times that you see in your day, you're just going about your day, driving to work, maybe going through a city, walking through a town village, the art that you see. Now, I'm not just talking about a painting that's up. I'm talking about the other ways that people have expressed themselves and how it makes an impact on all of us. Today, we're going to talk about how this wonderful thing called art connects us with our community. And she's going to help facilitate that as somebody that offers art therapy. Yes, it's therapeutic. And she's back with us. She's our professional of the year. Barbara Robertson is on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thanks, Steve. How are you?
Really good. Really good. It's making me think. It's making me think, in the last day, where I've been, what I've done, my travels around, where I've seen art, it's everywhere. But I think we sometimes don't see it. We don't see what's there. And it could even be, dare I say, even graffiti. Now, it shouldn't be on private property, but sometimes there's just a board up and then just people put up, their artwork up there, be it with a can of paint or what, a spray, whatever. But it's an expression. Some of that stuff is amazing. Like, I don't know how they did it. But that's just another example.
Right. The designs are sometimes really incredible. And I was on a trip once where there was a city park and they had actually erected a wall that was maybe 30 feet long and had a very smooth surface on both sides. And it was expressly there for people to come and paint graffiti on.
Cool.
And it had layers and layers of images because you could paint your design on it with no guarantee that somebody wasn't going to come by tomorrow and paint over it. But you got a chance to put your design, your style up in public where it could be seen and appreciated. And, if it lasted a little while, that would be great. And if somebody else decided to have a turn, well, that was great too, because it's all about how each one of us kind of brings our own style, our own sense to the community that we're a part of.
Well, there's two things going on here, I believe. You want the community to see it. You want to show that expression, but also you're energetically expressing yourself, as we've talked before, in terms of the therapeutic value of art, that it's getting out of you. You're purging what's within. And I just got a flash in my mind when you talked about it maybe being temporary in this, big graffiti wall. Side note, how funny it is. The word graffiti is sometimes a negative. And
right.
Call it
right.
outdoor art, if you will.
Outdoor art. There you go.
What about sidewalk chalk art? There's some amazing things that people have done. And guess what? When it rains, it's gone.
That's right. That's right. And in Buddhism, there's the tradition of doing sand paintings where lamas, monks will come together and they have all different colors of sand and they'll create a mandala, a circular image that is usually not an image of something recognizable, but rather a design of shapes and colors that fit together into a circular form. And they'll do it with sand. Very elaborate designs, a group collaboration. And when it's finished, it gets swept away shortly after it's complete. So there's another kind of an interesting focus on the process of creating art more than the product that's created. And when you think about community and how art connects us, that group of lamas had to connect and communicate with one another in order not to be in each other's way, not to put their color on top of someone else's color that was already down on the surface, to adjust their expectations to fit into the design of the whole. And in other words, to kind of try to achieve harmony within this group of people who are creating together.
Mm.
And that's, after all, what we're all kind of wanting to experience in this world is just having a sense of harmony among the group, whatever that is that we may be a part of.
Yeah, I forget about all this stuff until I start thinking about it. But look at paint night. It's been popular in the last, say, 10 years.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
here it is. It's turned into a social event where everybody is painting, maybe having a glass of wine, enjoying, the experience. Um, there's a lot going on in regard to art that sometimes we forget how cohesive it is for us and our community.
That's right. And even when it's not cohesive, I have this lovely example, a photograph that I saw of a group of women, and one of their boyfriends or husbands had come along. And each member of the group, that all the girls and the guy, were standing holding their finished art. And every woman's image was of a landscape that had been offered as the example to paint from or to be inspired by. And there was the guy standing there with the bat symbol, Batman,
Hmm.
the big yellow bat shape
Yep.
against the black sky. That was his painting, and he was every bit as proud of it as any of the women were about their efforts. And it was another kind of lovely example of how we don't all have to be the same. And even each landscape was different from each other. Everyone had their own individual style.
Hmm. Well, to your point, paint night, back to that again. We're all painting the same thing. You have an artist up there, and it could be, you know, a nighttime uh,
Like a skyline. Yeah,
skyline with a tree and a bird or an owl in it. And everybody's painting the same thing, but no surprise, every painting looks different.
every painting has its own unique something to it.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of was thinking about this because after we had met last week, and I was just kind of rummaging through my thoughts about it. And one thing that occurred to me is that we have listeners out there in the world. We have listeners who are tuning in right now for us, and others who may find us on another channel at another time as these
hmm.
episodes get repeated and broadcast in various different places.
Yep.
And how it's actually possible to think of all the listeners and you and I as part of a community that has some degree of interest in art and what art is and what art can do in this world. And I felt this just nice kind of warm sensation about that.
A
Just kind of
connection.
realizing, yeah,
We're all
connection.
connected, and
We
it
are
is
all connected.
through art. And this is your wonderful superpower, how you make us think about these things that we take for granted or we don't see the importance in them until you really think about it. Here's my next one. in my, you know, just popping in my head, getting a download right now.
Yep.
Now, when we say community, a lot of times you think of walking into town and seeing paintings and things and like that. But community is an assemblance of like-minded people. So I'm going back in my memory to album cover art.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Decades and decades and decades and on, thousands, millions of different album covers, and how when you start talking about them, if you're over a certain age, but guess what?
Right.
Vinyl's back now anyway.
Right.
You remember these covers and how it made an artistic impact on you, and sometimes the cover was just as important as the music that was inside of it.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And, I mean, I think it back in the 70s that I'm thinking of, things were really influenced, like typeface that would be used in everyday advertisement, I
Sure.
think were really developed probably in album cover art to begin with. And then
Sure.
graphic design went, hey, wait, we can make a typeface out of that. We can make a font with that.
Yeah.
And, bingo, it's
All
beginning
right.
to
Well, to your point
reach
there,
culture.
look at all the bands and their logos. And it's not just the logo. Like the Rolling Stones was a certain font, but then you had the the tongue sticking out. Look at the
Right.
band Boston. There's a certain look to it. And when you see it right away, you know what it is. And of course, look at albums like Boston. Oh my gosh, like the art that was done on those albums, and just like over the top, crazy kind of
Right.
stuff, but
Right.
very just like the music in that for that band, very detail oriented. Like they were very, very particular. But then you have, simple ones. I saw an album from Lynn Ronstadt that brought back memories, and it's her in a wearing a pair of roller skates with her two arms against the wall. It's very simple, but I remember it. I see it. I know
Yep.
exactly what it is, what
Yep.
album that
Yeah.
is. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think the word we use for that is iconic.
for sure.
Really kind of becomes a metaphor, a symbol for the music that it's representing, visually. And that
Yeah.
kind of brings me to something else that has come up for me around community. Um, I was recalling hearing something about a jeweled net in connection with community. And so I started digging around on good old internet, and I discovered that in India and in Buddhism, there is a metaphor called Indra's net. And Indra was a god that was considered to be part of the creation story in South Asia, and came up with a visual metaphor for the universe and its interconnectedness. So let me describe a couple of different writers' way of kind of conveying what this image was about. So the first one is from Alan Watts, who is a British and American writer known for really popularizing Buddhist, Taoist, and Hindu philosophy in the Western world. And he said, imagine a multi-dimensional spider's web in the early morning covered with dewdrops. So you got that kind of held in your mind.
Hmm.
Now, notice that every dewdrop contains the reflection of all the other dewdrops. And
Hmm.
in each reflected dewdrop, the reflections of all the other dewdrops in that reflection, and so on ad infinitum. That is the Buddhist conception of the universe in an image.
Wow. That needs a moment to process, especially the dewdrop reflecting the other dewdrops. Funny you should
Yes.
say that. I still remember last year I was riding my bike. It was there earlier in the morning, and I saw some
Uh-huh.
spider webs and I saw dewdrops on them. I had to stop and take pictures of
Take
just
pictures.
going in close, trying to get it in focus. Amazing what
Yes.
you can do in your phone. I almost couldn't push myself away because every angle was different because every dewdrop showed something different.
Had different reflections in it and different, maybe, kind of they're like little lenses looking at what's behind that
Yeah,
particular dewdrop.
for
So
sure.
all that, yeah.
Yeah.
So Buddhism uses a similar image to describe the interconnectedness of all phenomena. And this is where it's called Indra's net. When Indra fashioned the world, he made it as a web, and at every knot in the web is tied a pearl. Everything that exists or has ever existed, every idea that can be thought about, every datum that is true, every dharma in the language of Indian philosophy is a pearl in the Indra's net. Not only is every pearl tied to every other pearl by virtue of the web on which they hang, but on the surface of every pearl is reflected every other jewel on the net. Everything that exists in Indra's web implies all else that exists.
Hmm.
So even
Wow.
one pearl out of the whole net can convey the existence of the rest of the universe. And I just want to ask a simple question. What if we're the pearls? What if every time we connect with another human being or with another living being, with a sentient creature, we create an intersection in that net of the strands that are woven together? And the connection is what holds the pearl.
Never thought of that. We're deep visuals here. You got to take a second and kind of apply that. But
Take a second and just imagine what
wow.
would it mean if we were the pearls in Indra's net of creation? What would we need to, I guess, wrap our heads around about ourselves if that were true? It's just a thought experiment. I'm
Yeah.
inviting you to,
Yeah.
to
Something
wonder
that's
about.
one of those
You're
when I'm
open.
driving in my car and have music off and I just start focusing. It's like, oh, yeah, wow, okay. Hmm. The whole community thing with art. Other examples, how you think we're connected through art.
Well, in my personal experience as an art therapist, the art that's created during a session is offering an avenue for connection between myself and my client, and the client and me,
Sure.
just simply by the fact that I'm here witnessing what they're doing. They're working in front of me, and hopefully they're confident that I'm going to be accepting of whatever it is they draw, because that's my major, intent, to really just be open to whatever shows up on the page. And I often will say that at the start of a session, particularly if I'm doing groups. I assume that whatever shows up on your page is exactly what should show up because it showed up. I don't need any bigger reason than that. That's what came out of your hand and your heart and your mind. So that's what it should look like.
Hmm.
Exactly. And so, my intent is really to convey that level of acceptance about everything that I encounter in a person, even if it's perhaps something that's not gorgeous or not beautiful, but that's especially when it's appreciated, because to me, that's an indication that the artist is really being honest and authentic. Not everything that we hold in our hearts is beautiful. There's a lot of difficult material in there. And if it's going to come out and show up as black and red scribbles on a page, I'm so happy to see it. I just want to welcome it into the room.
I want to share what's in my heart about what you just said. And this is having seen all different types of therapy art that you shared with us a few podcasts back. But when you said, maybe there's, could be judgment by some or whatever, it makes me angry. Like what somebody is creating as they're expressing themselves, it doesn't matter what it looks like. Doesn't matter at all. Bring it
Exactly.
on. And I completely agree with you. And if you even talk with people who study energy, what's supposed to show up shows up. We're all different vibration.
Right.
And that's energetically what was supposed to appear because it came from within of someone.
Exactly. And it's still a pearl.
There's
It's
there there's a good point.
Yeah, it's still a pearl because it's connecting us. It's you showing me something about you, and it's me appreciating something about you, as well as the fact that you trusted me enough to show me.
Hmm.
And that's very meaningful for me as a therapist.
Here's a question I've never asked you, and if I feel it fits at this moment.
Sure.
How do you encourage somebody to express themselves? Do you say, create something about the way you're feeling at this very moment? What are you thinking? That how does that all take place?
It really can be very different from one person to the next. A
Hmm.
lot of it kind of depends on what might have come up in the first few minutes of a session. There are kind of two aspects that show up in a client's presentation in a therapy session. One is content. So they're telling a story about something that happened or some feeling they've had in response to an event or an interaction. And then there's the process, which is the way that they're telling the story and the emotions that they may not be naming, but which they may be kind of re-experiencing as they tell the story. Or they may be kind of editing how they tell the story. Every now and then they may stop in the middle of a sentence and then kind of shake their head and move on because they've decided they were approaching something that they don't feel safe enough to share. And so that would be an aspect of process that I would be paying attention to as a therapist. And so I might say, can you draw what it feels like when there's something you want to say, but you don't feel like it's okay to say it?
Mm. Interesting.
Or, yeah, or even, what was the feeling that came up for you when you stopped in the middle of that sentence? What did you notice? What were you aware of? Another time, I might, if I'm trying to help a client really kind of recognize the experience of having an emotion, which when starting early in life, adults that as kids came from hard places where they were presented with distressing events, often learn as a sort of creative adaptation to block out their awareness of the sensations that go with that feeling.
Mm.
And unfortunately, that tends to block out sensations that go with all feelings because it's very hard to just edit out, just censor the negative feelings and still be able to fully hold the joyful, positive feelings because they all happen in the same body. And joy is likely to wake up grief.
Say that last part again.
Joy is likely to wake up grief.
Why is that?
It's because they're both about ardent love. When we feel joy, it's because we're in connection with something we really love and feel just, so energized and enlivened by. And when we feel grief, we're feeling the devastation of its absence, that love we
Ah.
experienced. And so it's the flip side of the same coin. So often I will encounter clients who just don't feel. I think Jules Pfeffer had a great cartoon in the New Yorker years ago where there was a very businessman looking gentleman, dapper clothing and somewhat older.
Hmm.
And he was saying something like, well, my body is really just the chauffeur for my head.
Wow.
And that's a good way of describing when we really get stuck in our head because the rest, the sensations that evoke emotions doesn't feel safe enough to go to.
And then there's also the part of us that what we want people to see, but that really isn't who we are. By the way, I think I shared with you, I came close to being a syndicated cartoonist when I was
Yes,
22. And
right.
Jules, as soon as you said it, I see the cart. I've never seen that cartoon. I see
Uh-huh.
it because I know
But you
his
can see
style.
in the
Yeah.
style of his
There's a bit of
drawing.
gray wash he might have put
Yeah.
in there. Yeah, I
Yeah. The
totally
ink
got it.
pen line. Yeah.
Yes, very
Yeah.
fluid, very
Yeah.
free. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So interesting. I can't believe we're out of time. Like it just
I
flies right
know it
by.
flies by every
Hmm.
week.
Um, I'm gonna really process the joy and the grief thing because I've never thought of it that way, but it so makes sense about grief being the absence of joy.
I mean, really, every negative emotion is tied to love. Fear is about being afraid we're going to lose something we love or not be able to access something we love. Anger is about being treated in a way that doesn't reflect that we're worthy of being loved. See
I
if
have to
you can
tell you
notice
something,
that.
Barbara. I've
Ask
spoken
me.
with many people, done podcasts with metaphysical practitioners,
Mhm.
therapists. I've never heard it so simply described as you have. We talked about fear, false evidence appearing real, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All
Right.
good, but
Yeah.
never heard it described as being a fear of losing something you love. Everything love surrounds everything.
It
Every
does.
every emotion, everything is connected to love. Never thought
It
that.
is. It is. And I have to actually say, I can't own that one thought about fear. It came from Daniel Spiro's Substack entry, if anyone is interested in looking into that further. But he's given some really deep thought to what fear is all about.
Mm, wow.
And I love being able to read and piggyback on others' ideas and see how they fit with what my experience has already been. That's a part of what makes life exciting for me.
For sure. And I'm thinking right now, we're encouraged to keep a journal to express yourself. Why not or occasionally in your journal, draw something, create something?
Absolutely. Allow
Yeah.
yourself to make some marks. And really, drawing something just might mean putting down some lines and shapes and colors.
Doesn't have to be anything of anything. It just has to come from within.
That's right.
Yeah.
And automatically, because your energy is putting it on the page, it will convey something about the energy that you were experiencing in that moment.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, Lots of epiphanies today. Interesting. How do we find you? I know that you can support people virtually thanks to technology through art therapy. How do we find you?
So my website is robertsonarttherapyllc.com, all spelled out, no punctuation. My email is B as in Barbara, Robertson, Robertson .atr, not ART, but ATR, sort of flipping it around, at gmail.com.
ATR
So,
stands for Always Tremendous Revelation. That's
oh,
just
thank
me.
you. That's so sweet. It actually stands for Art Therapist Registered because they didn't want the letters after registered art therapist names to spell rat.
Okay. All right.
So that's why I embrace the ATR because it's not
Gotcha.
RAT.
I always
Anyway,
wondered about that. Now I know.
yep,
As
there you
always,
go.
thank you so much for today, and truly looking forward next time we get together.
Thanks, me too. You always bring so many connections to what I'm thinking about that it's really fun to kind of expand on them with you.
I show up with a blank mind. There's nothing going on here. You started right back to the album covers. My gosh, I see the flashes and visuals all over the place, and it's cool. Like I miss holding and looking at that art, and that's
You
what it
know, I
was.
just went to a vintage album sale in a local like spot here in Annapolis, and it was so great to see all those album covers. It really kind of triggered the Wayback Machine for me. That was
Yes,
fun.
yes.
Yeah,
That
yeah, a
that
lot of
was
fun.
art. That was our pop culture of the day, you
Pop
know.
culture and culture connects us to one
Sure.
another, gives us something in common.
Thank you for today. Appreciate it.
You too. Thanks.
We'll be
Bye
right
now.
back.
Till next time.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.